Hello there, Emily coming to you live with Own the Room. From overlooked to remembered. This is my first attempt at introducing. It's the formal introduction or invitation to the presence elevator. And this is the beginning journey. This is ground floor. So, let's get it started here. Okay, here we go. Own the room. From overlooked to remembered. This is my first attempt at a 40-minute keynote. It's the official formal invitation to the presence elevator. And this is ground floor, my friends. Here we go. Have you ever walked out of a meeting thinking, that just was not me. It was not me. You start the ruminating in your mind and you get into the car and you shut the door and suddenly you become the most articulate person who has ever lived. You know exactly what you should have said. You replay that meeting. You rewrite the conversation in your mind. You give the response that you wish you had given over and over. Maybe you think, why didn't I speak up? Why did I agree to that? Why did I soften what I really meant? Why did I let that moment pass? Why did I make myself smaller in a room that I was qualified to be in? And the frustrating part is that you knew the answer. You had the experience. You were prepared. You were qualified. You belonged in the room. But somewhere between who you really are and who showed up in that moment, something happened, honey. Something happened. You drifted. You see, I believe that many high-achieving leaders have been given the wrong diagnosis, and I am not a doctor, but I believe that we've been told that we need more confidence, speak with more confidence, walk with more confidence, lead with more confidence, look more confident, and listen. I'm all for the confidence. But what happens when confidence is not actually the problem? What happens when you know how to appear confident, but the person that you are presenting to the room no longer feels like you? What happens when you have become very good at performing success while quietly becoming drifted away from yourself, disconnected? That is not a confidence problem. That's a drift problem. I'm telling you. Drift is the distance between who you really are and how you are currently showing up. It's the distance between what you believe in and what you tolerate, between what you value and how you spend your time, between what you know and what you are willing to say, between who you were created to be and who you think the room will accept. The drift rarely happens dramatically, although I love a bit of drama. Nobody wakes up one morning and says, today I'm going to abandon everything I believe and become a completely unrecognizable version of myself. No, drift happens quietly. One addition, one edited opinion, one ignored instinct, one boundary we failed to hold, one opportunity we talk ourselves out of, one room where we decide it is safer to disappear than to be fully seen. And eventually we can become successful on paper while feeling overlooked in the rooms that matter the most. So today, I want to help you do three things. I want you to recognize the drift. And then we are returning to what matters. Third, we're re-entering your next room aligned, because executive presence is not something that you perform. It is someone you become. And you cannot own the room until you own who you are inside of it. So I have been practicing escape for a very long time. In fact, one of my earliest identities was what I now lovingly call the little escape artist. When I was a little girl, I had a habit of finding my way out of places. What can I say? And I do not mean metaphorically, I mean physically. If I did not like what was happening, if it felt uncomfortable, if it was boring, restricted, or misunderstood, apparently my little brain decided, well, there's only one reasonable solution here. We out of here. Deuces. And we'd find the exit, create a diversion, go somewhere far more interesting. Listen, I was not yet equipped with emotional regulation and strategic communication, or a carefully constructed boundary statement. I was equipped with two things, two legs, and I used them. So looking back, I can laugh at the creativity of that little girl. But I also see something deeper. Even as a child, when a situation felt uncomfortable, my instinct was not always to stay present inside it. My instinct was to escape it. And let's be honest, adults escape too. We simply make it look a little bit more professional, or not. We do not crawl through a window, or we just over prepare. We overthink. We stay busy. We delay the decision. We ask literally 10 people what they think because we do not want to take ownership of what we think. We smile and say, that's fine, when it absolutely is not fine. We allow the meeting to end, and then we give the entire presentation we should have given to ourselves in the parking lot. We escape by editing. We edit our opinions. We edit our questions. We edit our ideas. We edit our ambition. We edit the parts of our personality that someone once told us that were too much, too direct, too emotional, too creative, too intense, too bold, too loud, too ambitious, too different. And little by little, we learned how to become what the room appears to require. Maybe the room rewards quiet, so we become quiet. Maybe the room rewards agreement, so we stop challenging. Maybe the room rewards busyness, so we stay exhausted. Maybe the room rewards performance, so we build a version of ourselves that looks successful but does not feel true. And every time we edit ourselves to earn belonging, the distance grows. The distance is drift. Drift is not proof that you are broken, okay? It's information. It is an internal signal saying, you, my friend, have moved away from something that matters. So there is 3 signs of drift that I want you to recognize, and I want you to write it on your heart, okay? You leave rooms replaying what you may have said. You have the thought, you have the insight, you have the question, but you didn't trust yourself enough to release it in the room. You waited, you watched, you questioned whether it was good enough. And then somebody else said a version of what you were thinking, what you wanted to say. And then suddenly the room loves it. And you're sitting there thinking, I was going to say that, a version of it, but you didn't. That is not because you lack value. It's because in that moment you drifted away from trusting it. So sign number 2, approval-led decisions. You know what you believe, but you keep adjusting your decisions according to who may be disappointed. You're not asking what is right here. You are asking, what response can I survive? Who's going to be upset? Who will misunderstand me? Who will think that I have changed? Who will accuse me of being selfish? Who will no longer benefit if I finally hold this boundary? So instead of making the decision that aligns with your values, you make the decision that creates the least immediate tension. But avoiding tension does not always create peace, my friends. Sometimes it only creates resentment. So sign number 3, external success with internal disconnection. Everything looks fine. Everything is maybe better than fine. You are achieving, you're leading, you're serving, you're providing, you are brushing your teeth, you're building, you're contouring, you're getting things done. But you're the person that everybody calls because they know you'll handle it. Feels good. But internally, you are tired, you're exhausted. Not only physically tired, emotionally. You're tired of being the version of yourself that everybody else can depend on while you no longer feel like you can depend on yourself. You say yes and then regret it. You make commitments and then you resent them. You keep showing up, but you do not fully feel present in your own life. That is drift. And I want you to think about your own leadership for a moment. Where are you most likely to drift? Do you drift in what you believe? You know what matters, but the pressure of the room causes you to compromise it. Do you drift in how you decide? You overthink, delay, or continually look for permission? Guilty. Do you drift in how you speak? You soften your message so much that nobody knows what you actually mean. Or do you drift in how you allow yourself to be seen? You are capable. You are prepared. You have something to contribute. But you keep standing on one step behind in your own life. I want you to choose one. You do not need to solve it yet. You do not need to explain it to anyone. Just tell yourself the truth. Where am I drifting? That pause, it may feel uncomfortable. But awareness, it's the first act of executive presence. It's not performance. It's not polish. Awareness. Because you cannot return from a place you refuse to admit you have gone. And this is the truth that I want you to remember. The opposite of purpose is not failure. It is drift. Failure can be an event. Drift is a direction. And when you recognize the direction, you can make a new decision, my friends. And that's what I love. So we need to return to what matters. That's really a through line here. You see, there was a season in my life when from the outside, I looked successful. I was capable. I was dependable, professional. I knew how to enter a room. I knew how to do the work. I knew how to carry responsibility. I knew how to meet expectations. I knew how to keep it moving. I knew how to look strong. I call this version Corporate Emily. Corporate Emily could get it done, honey. She could solve that problem. She was putting those things into Salesforce. She could manage that pressure. She could present the idea. She could read the room. She could figure out what everybody needed and become useful very quickly. And being useful can feel a lot like being valuable until you realize that they are not always the same thing. You see, you can become incredibly useful to everyone around you while becoming increasingly unfamiliar to your own self. And on the outside, I was doing what successful people do. I was working and I was achieving and I was building and I was providing. And I was taking care of people, handling responsibility. But internally, there was a growing drift. My outside life and my inside life were no longer in agreement. There was a disconnect. I had become very good at doing what was required of me, but I was losing touch with what was really true. I knew how to answer the question, what does everybody need from me? I was less clear on the question, what is God asking of me? What do I believe? What do I want? What matters to me? What kind of woman do I want to be? What kind of leader do I want to become? What am I building? And why am I building it? There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from being successful at being someone you were never meant to become. Sometimes that exhaustion looks like competence. Sometimes it looks like achievement. Sometimes it looks like being the strong one. Sometimes it looks like being the person who never needs anything. Sometimes it looks like being surrounded by people while feeling completely disconnected. I built parts of a life that looked right, but I could no longer hear myself inside of all of it. And that is why this ground floor of my work is purpose. Not because everybody needs to quit their job or sell their home or go find themselves on the side of a mountain or get sober. Purpose does not have to be dramatic, although, again, I love a bit of drama. Purpose begins with clarity. What do I stand for? What do I value? What am I no longer willing to abandon in order to belong? Purpose is not only about what you do, it's about the internal agreement from which you do it. I'll say it again. It's not about the internal agreement from which you do it. Two people can hold the same title and have a completely different impact. Two people can have the same resume and lead a room differently. Two people can say almost the same words and only one of them will be believed. Why? Because people experience alignment. They can feel when your words agree with your values. They can feel when your decisions agree with your identity. They can feel when you are saying something because you mean it and not because you believe it is what the room wants to hear. They can feel when you no longer are asking the room for permission to exist. That is not arrogance. That is alignment. Arrogance, ego, it says, I'm more important than everybody in this room. Alignment, it says, I do not need to become less of myself in order to honor everyone in this room. There is a difference here. You can be humble and clear. You can be kind and direct. You can be gracious and still have standards. You can care deeply about people without handing them authority over your identity. You can listen to wise counsel without collecting opinions until you no longer recognize your own voice. Purpose becomes the internal ground beneath your feet. So I want you to choose one value that matters to you right now. Not the word that sounds impressive. Not the value you think a leader is supposed to choose. Choose the word that feels alive. Maybe it is integrity. Maybe it is faith, family, freedom, creativity, courage, truth, connection, service, growth, beauty, justice, compassion, loyalty, excellence. What is one value that needs to become more visible in your leadership? One word. Now I want you to complete the sentence. I value, but lately I have been blank. I value courage, but lately I have been avoiding. I value family, but lately I have been giving everyone else the best of me and bringing home the leftovers. I value integrity, but lately I have been saying yes when I mean no. I value creativity, but lately I have been trying so hard to fit the standard that I have forgotten what makes my work mine. I value faith, but lately fear has had the loudest voice. I value connection, but lately I have been isolating. I value freedom, but lately I have been allowing obligations I never consciously chose to control my life. I value truth, but lately I have been protecting the appearance of peace instead of having the honest conversation. So let's complete the sentence for yourself. I value blank, but lately I have been blank. Now let's not judge our answer. We're not being judgy here. Just notice it. Judgment keeps us hiding. Awareness allows us to move. Now complete the next sentence. One way I can return to alignment is blank. Not 10 ways. Not a complete life overhaul before Friday. One aligned action. One. Maybe it is speaking first in the meeting. Maybe it is having the conversation. Maybe it is holding the boundary. Maybe it's finally sending that proposal. Maybe it is asking for help. Maybe it is declining an opportunity that looks good but does not feel right. Maybe it is protecting time with your family. Maybe it is saying what you believe without turning it into an apology. Maybe it is allowing someone to be disappointed without immediately abandoning yourself to fix their feelings. One aligned action. We often believe that transformation requires us to become a completely different person. But sometimes transformation begins when we stop abandoning the person who is already there. This is why purpose matters. Purpose reduces that unnecessary noise. When you know what you stand for, every opinion does not carry the same weight. When you know what you value, every opportunity is not automatically yours. When you know who you are, every room does not get to rename you. That does not mean you will never feel nervous. It does not mean you will never question yourself. It does not mean every decision becomes easy. It means that underneath the emotion, you have somewhere solid to return. Think about a lighthouse. A lighthouse does not chase every ship. It does not run up and down the coastline begging to be noticed. It does not change its position according to the weather. It stays grounded. And it keeps its light on. It serves because it is anchored. It is what purpose gives us. It's an internal place to stand. And when purpose becomes clearer, confidence becomes quieter. You do not have to announce your worth every 5 minutes. You do not have to dominate the room. You do not have to perform certainty. You become grounded. And grounded leaders do not have to chase authority. Their alignment carries it. So, movement 3, we're going into the re-enter the room aligned. So there became a point in my life when I had to make a decision. Would I would continue choosing approval, or would I choose alignment? And I wish I could tell you that returning to yourself is always glamorous, because it is not. Sometimes returning to yourself looks like admitting something is not working. Sometimes it looks like telling the truth about how far you have drifted. Sometimes it looks like recovery. Sometimes it looks like surrender. Sometimes it looks like asking God to rebuild parts of you that you can no longer hold together through performance. Sometimes it looks like choosing your family, your faith, your health, your future over the version of you that everyone had become comfortable expecting. Sometimes it looks like disappointing people who benefit from your lack of boundaries. Sometimes it looks like grieving a version of your life that once kept you safe. Sometimes it looks like standing in the middle of uncertainty and saying, I would rather build an aligned life slowly than continue succeeding inside a life that no longer belongs to me. You see, I reached a place where I could no longer keep choosing appearance over truth. I could no longer keep proving I was fine. I could no longer keep using performance to cover what I needed to heal. And I had to ask myself, who am I when I am not performing for approval? Who am I when I stop trying to prove that I'm strong? Who am I when I stop measuring my value by how useful I am to everyone else? Who am I when I allow faith to become more than something I talk about? Who am I when I allow it to shape my decisions? I did not receive every answer at once. I did not suddenly become fearless. I did not wake up the next morning completely healed, fully confident, and immune to overthinking. That is not how transformation works, but I did make a decision. I would stop building my life around approval. I would start building it around alignment. And that decision gave me something more valuable than a perfect plan. It gave me a way to return. Because I still drift. We all do. The goal is not to become a person who never drifts. The goal is to become a person who recognizes it sooner and knows the way home. And that is why I created what I call the presence elevator. Because executive presence is not one trick. It's not only eye contact. It's not posture. It's not speaking louder. It's not having the perfect wardrobe. Although I clearly am not against a fabulous blazer, my friends. Executive presence is built floor by floor. And the first floor is purpose. What do I stand for? The second floor is regulation, my friend. How do I remain steady when pressure enters the room? Floor 3, embodiment. Does the way I carry myself agree with the person I say I am? Fourth floor, self-trust. Can I make a decision and hold it without asking 12 people to approve it? Fifth floor, expression. Love, love, love it. Can I communicate clearly? Can I say what I mean without hiding it under 5 minutes of explanation? The sixth floor is non-negotiables. Can I protect what matters? Can I hold a boundary even when someone does not like it? The seventh floor is core worth. Can I enter the room without asking the room to determine my value? And the eighth floor is exposure. Will I allow myself to be fully seen? Will I take the stage? Will I share the idea? Will I raise my hand? Will I take the seat? Will I stop standing behind the very work I was created to lead? Today, we're not climbing all 8 floors, no. Today, we stepped into the lobby. We began on the ground floor. Purpose. Because before you work on becoming more visible, you need to know what you want to be visible for. So before you speak with greater confidence, you need to know what you believe. Before you ask people to trust your leadership, you need to know whether your leadership is aligned with your values. Before you own that room, you have to own who you are. I want you to think about your next important room. And this is not a hypothetical room. The actual room, the meeting, the conversation, the interview, the sales call, the stage, the family discussion, the big leadership decision, the room where you already know that you will be tempted to drift. Picture it. Who's there? What is at stake? What do you normally do in that room? Do you become quieter? Do you over-explain? Do you fill the silence? Do you make a joke so no one sees how much it matters? Do you agree too quickly? Do you wait to be invited? Do you perform confidence instead of grounding yourself in truth? Now, I want you to complete this sentence. In my next room, I will stop blank. Maybe you will stop editing. Stop apologizing. Stop over-explaining. Stop avoiding. Stop performing. Stop waiting. Stop assuming everyone else has more authority than you do. Now I want you to complete this sentence. In my next room, I will start blank. I will start speaking clearly. I will start asking the question. I will start holding the boundary. I will start trusting my preparation. I will start taking the seat. I will start saying what I mean. I will start allowing silence instead of filling it with nervous explanation. I will start letting my presence arrive before my need to prove myself does. And finally, I want you to fill in the blank. In my next room, I will remember that I am blank. Qualified. Prepared, called, grounded, valuable, trusted, allowed to be seen. You choose the word. That is your next aligned action. Not a new personality, not a performance, not a costume, a return. So own who you are. The next time you walk out of a room, I do not want your first questions to be, was I impressive? Did everybody like me? Did I say everything perfect? Did I prove that I belong? Did I look confident enough? I want you to ask a different question. Was I aligned? Did my words agree with what I believe? Did my decision agree with what I value? Did I make myself smaller to keep the room comfortable? Did I betray my own instincts to avoid somebody else's? Or did I bring my whole, grounded, honest presence with me? Executive presence is not something you perform. It's something you become. It's someone you become. The leaders who are remembered are not always the loudest. They're not always the most polished. They're not always the people with the most impressive title. They are the leaders whose words, decisions, and presence agree. They know what they stand for. They know how to stay grounded when the pressure enters that room. They know how to return when they drift. And they allow the room to experience who they really are. You do not become overlooked because you lack value. You become overlooked when you drift away from the value that is already within you. So recognize the drift. Catch it. Return to what matters. Re-enter your next room aligned. And when you find yourself walking towards that familiar room, with that familiar pressure surrounded by the people who normally cause you to edit yourself, I want you to remember this. You do not need to become louder to be powerful. You do not need to change who you are. You do not need to become harder to be respected. You do not need to become someone else to be remembered. You need to become more aligned with who you already are. Because the goal is not to walk into every room and become the center of attention. The goal is to walk into the room without leaving yourself outside the door. You cannot own the room until you own who you are. Welcome, my friend, to the ground floor. Let's begin.